Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. This video, uh, I'm not really going to get into an introduction because there are a lot of things to talk about. First things first, today we have a moderate risk of severe weather from eastern Montana to a big portion of North Dakota and northwestern South Dakota. We also have an enhanced risk spanning from Canada uh, into the Dakotas, Montana, and Wyoming, and then a slight risk as well in the yellow, a marginal risk in the dark green, and you can always take a screenshot of this, the risk levels. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 0 being general thunderstorm risk, 5 being the high risk. 0 is the best that you can get, general thunderstorms. Technically, you could get nothing, but best from the risk zone, best from the risk level. 0 is thunderstorms. The worst you can get is a high risk. We have a moderate risk again from the Dakotas into Montana. We also have a marginal risk in the Delmarva vicinity and a slight risk from Missouri to Arkansas and into very small portions of Oklahoma and Texas with an associated marginal risk of severe weather. Now, ironically, or well, I don't know if it's ironic, but there is only a 2% risk of tornadoes from the moderate risk area stemming, son of a shtuk, stemming from Canada to the Dakotas. There's only a 2% risk of tornadoes. However, there's a 5% risk of tornadoes that's precipitating the slight risk. That is what is making the slight risk occur from Missouri to Arkansas. But the wind is what's precipitating the moderate risk in the northern United States. There is a 45% risk of wind damage with a conditional intensity group 2 tag on it, meaning that winds will be extremely strong, capable of EF1, EF2 level damage, with wind gusts of 100 miles per hour very likely. And just 5 minutes ago, there was a particularly dangerous situation severe thunderstorm watch issued from Montana into the Dakotas and some Wyoming counties uh, concerning 100 mile per hour wind gusts likely. The exact words are widespread gusts up to 100 miles per hour likely. There also is some hail. There also is a hail threat, but we'll cover that later. And I did cover the tornado threat already. A couple tornadoes possible. Hold on a minute. Sorry, the severe thunderstorm watch with a particularly dangerous situation tag on it will expire at midnight Eastern Daylight Time on Monday, 10 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time on Sunday. So, yeah. So again, there is a very pertinent risk of severe weather. The greatest and largest and most grand risk will be in the looks like a steak kind of with like very bold black lines uh, inside the pink area, that stippled region, that lined region. Not the dashes, but the actual lines. Uh, you know what I'm talking about. And then there's a SIG 1 or conditional intensity group 1 stemming from Canada down to Wyoming, the Dakotas, and Montana. There's a 30% risk of wind and a 15% risk of wind as well, and a 5% risk of wind also. And there is a 5% risk of wind from Missouri to the Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee tri-state border, and then into Oklahoma and Kansas. Now, a 5% risk of wind versus a 5% risk of tornadoes, they're not the same, right? Because a tornado risk, it has 2%, 5%, 10%, 15%, 30%, 45%, and a 60%, right? The 5% is the second level, whereas the 5% here with wind, because with wind you have a 5%, a 15%, a 30%, a 45%, a 60%, and then a newly added 75% and 90%. You have that. The 5% risk of wind is the first level at the bottom. The 5% risk of tornadoes was the second most bottom level. Uh, so yeah. And then there's also a 5% risk of wind in the Delmarva area, where diurnally driven convection is occurring. Uh, so awesome. And then there is a hail threat. And the hail threat is just a conditional intensity group 1 that extends from Canada down to the Dakotas, southeastern Montana, and northeastern Wyoming, with a 15% risk of wind extending from Canada to most of North Dakota, almost a third, or over a third, almost a half of South Dakota, into southeastern and eastern Montana and northeastern Wyoming, and then a 5% risk is in the brown area. So since there is a moderate risk that was issued, the updated part of the area is the most important. So we are not, in fact, going to go in chronological order like we usually do, because there was an upgraded risk to a moderate. This is a serious and life-threatening situation with wind potential wind damage equaling around high-end EF1, low-end EF2 strength. Uh, at least that's what I think, because I don't have the enhanced Fujita scale in my mind. I can look up the enhanced Fujita scale, but anyway, so summary. A bow echo with 60 to 100 mile per hour gusts appears likely over the northern high plains into the Dakotas this afternoon, with a few instances of severe hail and isolated tornadoes also possible. A couple of tornadoes and isolated damaging wind gusts are still possible across the Ozarks region. So, before I get into the actual update, the EF scale, EF1 damage is consistent with winds from a tornado, specifically of 86 to 110 miles per hour. So, with this wind, we could see damage that is equal to, or maybe even exceeding, in very isolated instances, EF1 level strength. So, here we go. Anyways, 20Z update. A Category 4 or moderate risk was issued to portions of the northern high plains. Confidence is increasing in a well-defined cold pool-driven bow echo mesoscale convective system developing across portions of the northern high plains later this afternoon. A potentially dense swath of 60 to 100 mile per hour wind gusts appear likely, and a derecho may occur. Yeah, that's not fun whatsoever. When you hear derecho, that gotta get the alarm bells ringing. Anyways, current observations depict a near stationary surface boundary across far southeastern Montana, northeastward into western North Dakota along an elongated surface trough. High-resolution deterministic and ensemble guidance, including the high-resolution ensemble forecast, rapid ensemble forecast system, and some of the latest WOFS runs, all depict a classic bow-echo mesoscale convective system traversing this surface boundary, accompanied by a widespread severe wind swath and scattered gusts over 75 miles per hour. The mesoscale convective system would benefit from localized vorticity along this boundary, which in turn could support bookend vortices and the subsequent development. Sorry, let's read that again. The mesoscale convective system would benefit from localized vorticity along this boundary, which in turn could support bookend vortices and the subsequent development and sustenance of a rear inflow jet, lending plausibility to the guidance consensus. Latest meso-analysis also continues to show eroding mixed-layer convective inhibition and 2,500 plus joules per kilogram of mixed-layer convective available potential energy in place. Low to mid-level lapse rates are already exceeding 8 degrees Celsius per kilometer in some spots, coinciding with 50 to 60 knots of surface to 8-kilometer bulk shear oriented normal to the anticipated Bow-Echo leading line, which is favorable for derecho development. Alternatively, multiple severe wind-producing multicellular clusters may occur, which would support higher coverage of severe winds, with gusts occasionally exceeding 75 miles per hour. Otherwise, the previous forecast remains on track with only minor changes made to the thunder and severe probabilities to reflect the latest observations. So this is the previous discussion issued now. So we've got a very huge paragraph to read. So there may be conflicting information, but just reference the latest update, maybe take a screenshot of the update, and have it in your phone somewhere or something so that you can contradict information that I'm reading from the latest update. Okay. Montana into Wyoming into the Dakotas. Water vapor imagery late this morning shows a strong upper trough over the northwestern contiguous United States, and it is forecast to pivot eastward through the northern high plains through tonight. Surface mesoanalysis places a low near the Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota border with a frontal zone sorry, with a frontal zone draped southwest to northeast from northeastern Wyoming into far western North Dakota. Cyclogenesis and strong heating and moistening of the boundary layer will favor thunderstorm development by mid-afternoon in the vicinity of the Big Horns. Relatively steep low-level lapse rates on the immediate cool side of the frontal zone and moderate convective available potential energy values will support a risk of large hail and severe wind gusts once thunderstorms begin to mature. A linear cluster is expected to evolve during the late afternoon into potentially a Bow-Echo during the early evening, with the severe wind risk notably increasing and becoming more widespread. We have increased the intensity highlight from southeast Montana into western portions of North Dakota, where it seems increasingly probable that a swath of intense gusts, possibly a Bow-Echo, which we now know in the recent update will be a Bow-Echo, is prognosticated by a diverse array of different model cores and runs this morning. This model signal appears reasonable given the co-location of surface features, lapse rates, and upper level support. It is within this mesoscale corridor that localized peak gusts may range from 85 to 100 miles per hour. We considered an upgrade to a moderate risk, but will defer to the 20Z outlook for additional model run-to-run continuity and confidence in mesoscale environmental features. We now know that a moderate risk was issued. This activity will sweep northeastward during the evening, with a gradual lessening of the wind and hail hazards towards the early overnight as it moves east into the eastern half of the Dakotas late. Ozarks. A weak trough and low over the central United States, with embedded disturbances from Oklahoma into Iowa, continues to drift northeastward late this morning. An associated band of 30 to 40 knots of southwesterly mid-level winds and deep moisture will lie across the Ozark Plateau this afternoon. The 12Z UTC Springfield, Missouri sampled RAOB. To be honest, I forgot what that means, but the 12Z UTC Springfield RAOB sampled this belt of stronger flow with 80 knots at 200 millibars. Heating of a very moist air mass with some minor enlargement of low-level photographs may result in a few weak supercells developing coincident with peak heating. A couple of brief tornadoes and isolated damaging wind gusts are possible with this activity. Yeah. Eastern Virginia and North Carolina. A weak surface cold front is sagging southward across central Virginia this morning. A combo of strong heating and frontal forcing will lead to widely scattered thunderstorms this afternoon across southeast Virginia and northeast North Carolina, and the strongest of these cells could produce gusty winds. So that's that. This is for today. We actually have a big stretch of severe weather expected, not only from today, but also into Monday, into Tuesday, and also into Wednesday and Thursday. So, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5, and potentially even beyond, maybe into Friday for portions of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Uh, that's at least what the CSU MLP, or Colorado State University Machine Learning Probabilities Model, uh, that's what that says. Now, anyways, we have three separate moderate risks, but first we have a slight risk from Colorado to Wyoming to Nebraska. And then we have, again, like I said, three moderate risks, one originating in Canada, one originating down in like the a ton of states over here: Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee as well. So 6 states, including Paducah and all that, and then a marginal risk, and third and last one, extending from Minnesota to Wyoming to the uh, Kansas-Missouri border into the panhandle of Texas. This is accompanied with a 2% tornado risk that is essentially near the slight risk. We have a wind threat as well, which also accompanies the slight risk. It makes the slight risk the whole. It's the whole of the slight risk. And then, the wind risk extending from that fidget spinner looking marginal risk, and that all marginal risk also in those areas near Paducah. And then a hail risk, which is potentially significant for tomorrow on Monday in Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska. And we also have that marginal risk up in Canada. So, nothing too horrible. It could be a little bit worse. It also could be a little bit better, but beggars cannot be choosers unequivocally. Anyways, summary: scattered severe thunderstorms capable of large hail and perhaps a brief tornado and damaging wind gusts are possible from Monday afternoon and evening in northeast Colorado, southeast Wyoming, and into the Nebraska Panhandle. Additional, more isolated occurrences of large hail and damaging winds will be possible from the Canadian border into the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles. Sporadic damaging winds may occur from the Ozarks Plateau into the Mid-South. Synopsis: an upper low will pivot northward across central Canada with temporary height rises over the plains. Moderate southwesterly flow aloft will persist from the central Rockies into the northern plains during the day as an area of high pressure modifies there. To the south, low pressure will develop from the central to southern high plains, with surface winds veering to easterly over Kansas and Nebraska and into eastern Colorado and Wyoming late. Ample moisture will exist with the zone of backed easterly flow, and this moist and unstable air mass will accelerate westward during the evening as 850 millibar winds increase ahead of a secondary wave moving into the Rockies overnight. A weak surface trough will also remain over the mid-Missouri Valley, just east of the western Dakota surface high pressure. Elsewhere, a weak mid-level wave will persist into the middle Mississippi and lower Ohio valleys, providing a focus for thunderstorms within the moist air mass. Central Plains. An area of moderate instability will develop across the Central Plains as strong heating occurs and low-level winds increase out of the east. Storms are most likely to develop near the higher terrain from eastern Wyoming into eastern Colorado and on the interface of the steeper low-level lapse rates and moistening upslope air mass. Favorable effective shear near 50 knots and steep lapse rates will clearly favor supercells initially with large damaging hail, with areas of wind-driven hail as thunderstorms evolve eastward through early evening. Low-level wind veering height may also support a brief tornado or two. The most concentrated area of severe thunderstorms will be from northeast Colorado into western Nebraska, but sporadic cells may occur as far north as the Black Hills area. Finally, a few cells may develop within the hot inverted V environment into the Texas panhandles and western Oklahoma during the afternoon, with locally damaging wind gusts. um, Far northern plains. Sorry. Late Monday night into Tuesday morning, warm and moist air advection will accelerate ahead of the developing trough over the Rockies. Models are a bit uncertain, but the potential will exist for elevated thunderstorms with hail potential over eastern Montana into northwest Minnesota as lift and instability increase. Southeast Missouri into western Tennessee. A slow-moving mid-level trough should again provide a focus for storm development as deep moisture is maintained and areas of heating occur. New development is most likely to occur with any existing mesoscale convective vortices or near differential heating zones. Locally strong low-level shear is anticipated, which may aid brief and weak tornado potential. Be right back. Wait. I am back, everybody. So, unfortunately, for tomorrow, it's going to the severe weather. I shouldn't say unfortunately, but fortunately, the severe weather is expected to subside tomorrow. However, the severe weather is expected to actually pick up significantly on Tuesday, where we do have a an enhanced risk of severe weather from North Dakota and South Dakota to Minnesota and Canada as well. We also have a slight risk extending from Canada to the Dakotas and then wrapping around back into Minnesota and going back into Canada, and then a marginal risk from Canada down into Minnesota and Montana, and also going down and down and down into the Midwest and Plains. This enhanced risk does consist of a 45% uh, hatched risk with a conditional intensity group 1 in North Dakota and Minnesota, and then the 30% or the red risk goes from Canada into the Dakotas and Minnesota. The 45% is the pink area, if you have been wondering. The 15% risk goes from Canada and then stretches down into two places uh, from the Dakotas and then wraps around back into Minnesota, and then the conditional intensity group 1 risk, or the hatched stippled region, goes from Canada to the Dakotas into Minnesota, and then the 5% risk goes from, which is the marginal risk equivalent, goes from the Dakotas and Minnesota all the way down into the Midwest and the Plains. So, here we go. So, summary. Numerous severe thunderstorms are likely to develop across parts of the northern plains and the upper Mississippi Valley Tuesday afternoon and into the night. Several strong tornadoes, which is very concerning, very large hail, and damaging winds will be possible. Elsewhere, isolated to widely scattered severe thunderstorms may also occur across the Central Plains, with a risk for large hail and damaging winds. Dakotas into western Minnesota. Significant severe storms are likely Tuesday afternoon and evening, with the greatest strong tornado potential across northern and eastern North Dakota into far northwest Minnesota and across the international border. A progressive short wave will move out of the Rockies and across the northern plains, with a 40 to 50 knot mid-level speed maximum and cooling aloft. Low pressure will develop into North Dakota and move into southern Manitoba through 0Z or 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Importantly, a substantial warm front is forecast to move through the area, with a rapid increase in dew points and instability. There appears to be minimal failure modes for the triple point and warm front, with little, if any, precipitation forecast ahead of it, and a dry air mass north of it with some capping. A low-level jet will also increase late in the day, with 40 to 50 knots out of the due south at 850 millibars. All of this will combine to produce a dynamic and potentially dangerous scenario for parts of North Dakota and/or perhaps near or just north of the Canadian border. The steep lapse rates aloft and favorable wind profiles near and northeast of the surface low may conditionally favor stronger tornadoes. However, given the setup is 3 days out, we will maintain the enhanced risk with conditional intensity grouping 1 due to uncertainties. Otherwise, the entire warm sector extending into South Dakota and western Minnesota will also be very conducive to supercells and eventual bowing structures with tornadoes, very large hail, and damaging winds. Other severe thunderstorms may occur into the Central Plains as well, with hail and wind. Substantial instability will also extend southeastward into Illinois and surrounding areas, with more of a conditional risk of isolated afternoon storms, as lift will be weaker in these areas. Alright, so that is that. This risk actually does continue into Wednesday as well, and even into Thursday. Potentially, there's the big word, potentially, also into Friday. Boom, booyah. So, we're going back to this again. I know it's a different, so, we haven't done this in a while, but we're going back to this again. There's a 30% risk of expected severe weather from Minnesota to Wisconsin to Iowa. And then there is a 15% risk encapsulating the entirety of Minnesota into eastern portions, very eastern portions of the Dakotas, into like 99% of Iowa, northern Missouri, northwest Illinois, most of Wisconsin, and into portions of the UP of Michigan and Lake Superior. So, yes, I know my Great Lakes. This is Erie. This is Ontario. So Erie, Ontario, Michigan, Huron, and then Superior, because if you're Superior, you're on top. And then this is also day 5. So the day 5 risk, which is Thursday, extends from just outside of Detroit all the way encapsulating southern and southwestern and western Michigan into northwest Ohio, into central and northern Indiana, into south central, and then north central Illinois, including Chicago, Bloomington, Illinois, and Springfield, Illinois, and into southern and southeastern Wisconsin, including the Milwaukee area, into the Quad Cities area, eastern Iowa, and into northeastern and eastern Missouri, including St. Louis. Again, big cities include Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Madison, Wisconsin. So that's cool. That's for Thursday. Friday, there's nothing yet, but there may be something according to the Colorado State University Machine Learning Probabilities Model. Then Saturday and Sunday, I don't see anything else. But anyway, yeah, that's that. So, discussion Wednesday. A concentrated area of potentially significant severe weather is expected Wednesday afternoon and evening, centered across portions of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. A number of the deterministic models have trended slightly faster with the progression of a lead shortwave trough and associated jet streak through the northern plains into the upper Mississippi Valley. At the surface, low pressure initially over eastern South Dakota is forecast to develop northeast along a cold front moving from the eastern Dakotas into Minnesota. The trailing extension of the boundary is expected to move more slowly into the mid-Missouri Valley before stalling in response to a deepening cyclone over the central high plains. Steep lapse rates and a very moist boundary layer will contribute to moderate to strong instability across the warm sector, with initial thunderstorms potentially developing by early afternoon from the Red River into central Minnesota. Subsequent storms are likely to develop across southern Minnesota into Iowa and northern Missouri by mid to late afternoon. The models indicate 40-plus knots of deep layer shear across the warm sector, supportive of supercells and Boeing structures capable of all severe weather hazards. The severe weather threat is expected to spread east through the upper Midwest during the evening hours. Day 5, Thursday. Both the ensemble means and deterministic models indicate the development of a prominent mid-level low over Manitoba or northwest Ontario, with a potent shortwave trough moving through the base of that feature from the upper Mississippi Valley through the upper Great Lakes. A belt of unseasonably strong mid-level winds will attend the shortwave trough from the Central Plains into the upper Great Lakes. At the surface, ensemble member clustering and the deterministic models indicate the primary low pressure over Ontario, with some signal for a secondary cyclone or frontal wave developing from the mid-Missouri Valley into the upper Midwest during the day. The associated surface front. Strata again, sorry. The associated surface front is forecast to advance through the upper Midwest into the upper Great Lakes with the trailing extension of the boundary moving into the mid-Mississippi Valley and the southern plains. The presence of moderate to strong instability across some prefrontal worm sector suggests that potential for severe thunderstorms from the upper Midwest into the southern plains. Within that broader envelope, a potentially more concentrated area of severe weather may materialize from parts of the upper Midwest into the mid-Mississippi Valley during the afternoon and evening hours. There, the most favorable overlap of the forcing for ascent, sufficient vertical shear, and ample instability are expected to reside. Day 6, Friday. The ensembles and majorities of deterministic models indicate the upper Great Lakes shortwave trough from Thursday lifting northeast into Ontario and Quebec. At the surface, the models suggest that a weakening cold front will advance into the northeast and through the Ohio Valley. Some severe weather threats could develop along the front by the afternoon. However, the models suggest that the boundary will become increasingly displaced from the strongest mid-level winds and the associated vertical shear. Isolated severe thunderstorms also appear possible in the vicinity of a deepening lee cyclone over the central high plains. Saturday and Sunday, the ensemble mean solutions indicate some potential for mid-level troughing to develop from the northern Rockies into the northern plains next weekend, which is supported by a number of the deterministic models. At the surface, there are indications that a frontal system may stretch from the upper Midwest or the Great Lakes into the central high plains, where some severe weather threats could develop. Well, guys, so that's all I have right now. There will be severe weather. Actually, there is severe weather going on right now. There are 3 severe thunderstorms expected, or severe thunderstorm warnings that have been issued for Montana and Wyoming as well. So it's going to be a long night. We may even get a derecho, so I'm not surprised. Uh, but anyways, hope everybody gets through this severe weather. Hopefully everybody has a great day, great week, and great whatever. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.